All right, guys. So it's close of work to 3:39, and we had Biden come over here at this is the industrial area here in Durham, and he's here. So we have the police cutting off the place. I think they grow crystals and microchips and stuff like that. So he's over here. I don't know what his business is, but it's a bit of coincidence. Biden is here at my home state, and Kamala Harris is over there in Ghana. So probably something saying go and play the jackpot. Probably you win something. So yeah, I'll be taking you on a different route on today's edition of Ride Along With Us. So let's go. All right, so like I was saying earlier, Biden is in the state to commission a microchip company, a company called Wolfspeed, just about a minute drive from where I work at a Triangle. And so there's a lot of police activity. I didn't get to take a picture. They blocked this exit. That's what it leads to, and you will see oncoming traffic on the opposite side with blue lights flashing. You see that the police have cut off that place. I don't know for what reason, and traffic is backing up. Yeah. So, like I said, it's a bit of coincidence. This is my state. Biden is here, and his vice Kamala is in my country of birth. So I might hit the jackpot if I do some permutations with the date and the numbers, right? But anyway, this is not the reason why I'm having this talk with you on today's edition of Drive Along With Me. It's got everything to do with Kamala Harris's visit to Ghana. I think he's been in Ghana since, oh man, this traffic is heavy. So like you see, this traffic is heavy. It's basically stopped everything. So it doesn't only happen in third world, right? But anyway, not to deviate. I talked about it on my earlier video on my way to work, and for some reason my memory card, I think there was no space, so I got cut off. So I'm trying to rehash this thing all over again. I hope that I come with the same intensity as I did in the morning. You find out that the US, the West basically, and I know you understand when I say the West, the European countries and Canada and the United States, always with their foreign policy comes with the LGBTQ plus agenda. And this I don't know when they're going to learn, but they don't seem to be learning, especially when you are no longer a bloc, the only economic bloc. We now have China, and you see Russia flexing its muscles, and the United States. The European Union is basically dead. They're struggling with their own economy, but each time the leadership, U.S. leadership, whether Democrat, whether Republican Party, assume office and they have some stuff to do with Africa, their tone, their body language is always condescending. It's like they're looking down on Africa, and for some reason they attach human rights and LGBTQ agenda. And I have nothing against the LGBTQ plus community. I mean, I live here, I work with them. Matter of fact, any corporate organization in the United States preaches diversity, inclusiveness, you know. And even back at home, even though we don't sing it and we frown upon such behaviors, I lived Ghana for a very long time. I've never seen where anybody who has same-sex, you know, sexual tendencies is lynched or killed, you know. I mean, people will come to your rescue. That you are of that mindset does not mean that you're not a human being. So human rights should apply. But the double standard that the US and the rest of the West seem to display is what I look on as, and the way they come at African countries with all the forcefulness is what makes me cringe, makes me mad, makes me angry. Almost like they're always looking down on us. So recently, at a press conference between the Ghanaian president, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, and the vice president of the United States, a journalist asked the question. Now you would think that, oh, that's a journalist, but it's a deliberate agenda. They want to talk about it, they find ways to talk about it, so they plant a journalist in there. And the question was, why are you touring? The three countries that you're touring have very unfriendly laws against the LGBTQ plus community. So why are you here on a business trip? They always sneak those questions in there. And we just look on to them like, oh, this is an international journalist, and they're just asking their questions. But it's deliberate. And at the end of the day, it takes away from the very reasons why they travel over there. And it becomes an LGBTQ topic all over. And then you would have thought that, okay, you go to Africa and you do all of this. But then when you go to China, China has very stringent laws against that community. You don't come off with the same tone. When you go to the Middle East, you do not do that. Why is it that it's only when you come to countries in Africa that you seem to want to shove it down our throat? And most of the times you make the president very uncomfortable, because this very topic is a deal breaker for the people. And the leaders of African countries know, especially sub-Saharan Africa, they know that you can basically lose an election just by being pro-LGBTQ plus. I mean, even PDA, right? Public display of affection is frowned upon between heterosexual couples. It's frowned upon in Africa. So you cannot be in a car and start kissing on your girlfriend as a man, or your, you know, as most of these white folks, when they start dating blacks and they visit Africa, they want to do, you know. People frown on it. Now to talk about a practice that is considered a taboo, but you do that and you attach it as a human right policy. So, and there are folks here who want to engage in polygamy. It's their human rights. These are adults who say, okay, we are cool with being with one man, adult women, but you frown on that, but you seem to be projecting the LGBTQ community. And if you're so much against it, China holds almost half of your debt in the United States. Why don't you desist from doing business with China or with Saudi Arabia? Why? Why is it that when it comes to Africa, you so willingly project that? Or when it becomes politically expedient to you, like it happened with Obama. When he started off in his political career, he was against Lgbtqi. When he became flag bearer, he said his views are evolving. When he got to the last, finished his 4-year term and got to his last 4 years, he says he was all for it because there were funds coming in left and right from Hollywood. It was politically expedient for him, so he jumped on it. So why don't you allow Africans' views to evolve? Why are you shoving down? And you could see from Nana Akufo-Addo's face that was a very uncomfortable. And I mean, behind the scenes, he would have said his mind. But here is a case where you guys have divided Africa in bits and pieces, divided them into very small countries. And I mean, look at Nigeria, for instance, is the second biggest economy in Africa after South Africa. It has the biggest African population. But if you look at the size of Nigeria, it will fit squarely in a state in the United States, Texas. So here you are, over 200 million people, purported to have the biggest economy in Africa. And you deal with it. How do you fight against a giant, negotiate with a giant like the United States or China? But you have succeeded in breaking the backs of Africa. And every forward-looking leader, like the Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, first president of Ghana, who suggested after independence that Africa needs to come together and form, even before the EU was established, to go against countries like China and the United States, because they could not by themselves compete with China and the US. Had to come together. Then you had countries like Nigeria and Ethiopia going against him. Today we're trying to forge ahead to form one Africa, because just Ghana negotiating with the United States is a non-starter. Just because, look at it this way, the whole of Africa, you combine our contribution to trade, is the size of South Korea's economy. So we see the agenda, and the only language that I believe the United States understand is might, which is why, even though Russia is doing the most abominable thing in the whole world, taking over another country, you cannot say anything, because they will match you power for power, pound for pound. But when it comes to Africa, you want to use your might to push them in a corner where they can't even breathe. The people themselves are not ready for that kind of lifestyle. Leadership over the religious bodies and everything are ready to disengage from, if it's Catholic, from the Roman Catholic, if it's the Anglican, they are ready to disengage, because they know the mindset of their people. This is not how they operate. Any political party in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, that willingly embrace that lifestyle will go to extinct, because the people that they govern will not have any space for it. And so instead of you going there and doing trade with them, you will I mean, you sneak that subject somehow, somewhere. It is the hypocrisy of it. And like I said, I haven't seen anybody who has been killed, maimed. They traveled over here, they know your human rights situation and everything, so they will use that to gain entry into the West, like they do in Canada and all of that. You have people who do cross-dressing and act like they've been given star reception in Africa, in Nigeria. Yeah, so like I said, we have a couple of cross-dressers in Africa, Nigeria, Ghana. The male acting to be dressing up, making up like they are women. They receive star reception. They haven't been lynched. So, really, why push this agenda when you know that it will hit a brick? And then when China begins to make inroads in Africa, you think you're being outpaced in the competition. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. So I don't know who your foreign policy advisors are and why you start to push that agenda all the time. But like I said, except a political party in Africa is willing to give up power, if they by any means try to sneak that in, they will lose power, and they know it. If you're so much against it, then don't do any trade with Saudi Arabia, because you know that your contractors and various contractors in automobile, ammunition, and they will lose their contract. And there's a willing nation who is ready to supply them, Russia, China. Which is why, because of your interest, you do not push this agenda down their throat. It's almost like, we need to get Africa, we need to get them. You're already squeezing us. And I bet you will not see any African come over here. Sometimes immigration and stuff, and corrupt leadership is what has brought us to this point where almost everybody looks down on an African in spite of their degrees and their exposure. But who is to blame? Because you go in there, and for instance, you go in, you want to buy cocoa, but you don't want the finished product. You want the raw material. You go to certain places, you want raw crude, you want raw bauxite. And you buy it at next to nothing. You come over here, add value to it, and sell it at exorbitant rate to the same people you're taking it from, because you have engaged in trade agreement that is largely skewed to your advantage and to the disadvantage of the very countries who bring out these raw materials. Today we will not be able to use a phone without it getting hot, if not for the mineral discovered in the Congos. So you use our raw materials, but you don't want to use our human resources and our intellectual capabilities. And you go into this nation with your might, because they are small. You've divided them into 54 countries or thereabout. Where lies the morality of that? So please, whoever your LGBTQ at this time as I speak, it's not going to fly, and nobody is getting killed for it. But it has found its way into media, and you're making capital of it, and you're encouraging it. Our health sector still can't cater for even people who suffer from regular generic diseases. But you're pushing the agenda for reconstructive surgery, right? You're pushing the agenda for diseases that arise from engaging in that kind of practice. So when these guys start to fall sick, who do you expect to treat them? You have very sophisticated health sector here. You can cater for those things. But we cannot. We cannot cater for loose bowels and all of these things associated with that behavior. Our health sector is not developed to that extent. So for me, it's a shame, because the weaker a country is, the more susceptible they become to your greed. One would have thought that when Putin's Russia went against Ukraine, that you would have brought together all of your ammunitions and go after them. But you're unable to do that. Why? Because they have what you have. And there will be collateral damage on both ends. So you find a weaker Africa and you push down their throat that which they themselves do not want to accept. Allow us be. And whoever is advising you on foreign policy, as far as you go with LGBTQ plus, it's not going to go down. The people themselves have vowed not to allow it. Churches have disengaged from their parent churches in Europe because of this. It is not in our nature. I don't know when we will get to that, but as I speak now, we are not there yet. Your actions, you instead of correcting the atrocities that you have caused on that continent, taking the very best, building your nations with it, families profiting from it. Today you pay reparation to those who suffered the Holocaust, but you have failed to pay reparation to Africans and African Americans for the heinous crime that you have committed on that continent. And you continue to deplete our societies. Let's just say that African leaders are corrupt. Let's say they are corrupt. But really, what is their corruption compared to what you are siphoning from Africa? You have separated families, separated tribes. Heck, you have separated our intellectual capabilities, because we were building our own intellectual capabilities. You've stolen our intellectual properties. You've made it your own, and you continue to breathe down our necks. It is sad that we come to the table without equity. You've taken divide and rule to the next level. There's still neocolonialism. We have signed treaties that we have no business signing, to the extent where we can no longer, any great nation that is worth their salt had to close their economy at some point and trade among themselves until they got to a certain power, to now open up and trade at an equal footing. You throw the crumbs, we drag them. You haven't paid for your crimes. You have destroyed virtually the African continent. And now you're bringing a lifestyle that we have no business dealing in. We come here, we abide by the rules. Why don't you abide by the rules when you get over there? Instead of looking down on them, why don't you abide by the rules? Why don't you respect cultural norms of these people? Of our people, of my people. We have got to a point where you've not only destroyed our economy, you've brought in foreign religion, forced people to adapt to this foreign religion, Islam, Christianity. We have no business in that. Today, the very brightest thing that there's somewhere that we go to after we are dead. And so we no longer are fighting for what belongs to us and the generations. We no longer fight for posterity, because we die and we go to heaven. So all we are looking at is the road to heaven. If churches could build a nation, if mosques could build a nation, let's throw that away. If churches could build a nation, why did you separate church from state? Why? So whoever your advisors are and everything, this thing is not going anywhere anytime soon. Treat Africans as your equals, because we're tired of it. We're tired of policies attached to that agenda. They're not yet there yet. If Africa is in the state that it finds itself today, it's because you placed us there. It rests solely on and squarely on your shoulders. The heinous crimes that your people committed, that you have refused to pay for it, and have destroyed our mindset with your system of government and your economic systems. Used to be value for value, now it's paper for value. Leave us the hell alone.